This is a lecture from OpenTuition. To benefit from the lecture, you should download the free lecture notes from opentuition.com.
This chapter looks at the audit of receivables. Receivables in anything really but a cash business are liable to be very material amounts. And they're also amounts which require some care at valuing, because unfortunately, although you and I no doubt always pay our debts, some people don't. And there are companies which go into liquidation, which fail, and who will never pay the amounts they owe. It is really universal practice to carry out what is called a receivables or debtors circularization. This is where you write to customers, debtors, asking them to confirm what they owe to your client. Again, it will tend to be done on a sample basis, and very often, as it says third from the bottom here, we'll use stratification. We maybe write to the 10 very biggest customers with the biggest balances. We maybe write to 50% of the medium-sized balances, and then maybe we write to 50 out of the several hundred of the small balances. So we cover by value a good proportion of the total receivables balance. There are two types of circularization, positive and negative. A positive circularization is where you want the customer to reply whether or not they agree with the balance. So if they agree with the balance, they will just sign the letter, post it back saying we agree. If they don't agree with the balance, they will say what balance they have. And any differences, apart from any errors, but any differences you hope can be explained by timing differences. Maybe on the last day of the year you sent an invoice to that customer, which the customer hadn't received yet at the end of the year, so shows is owing a smaller amount. Or maybe in the last day of the year, the customer thought they'd paid you, transferred some money to you, but that hadn't got into your books yet. So most of the differences can be explained by timing differences. Other differences are probably due to an error, either by your client or by their customer. Negative circularization, what you're saying there to the client's customers is only reply if you don't agree. And these are almost useless because not everybody replies to these letters anyhow. There's no legal obligation to bother filling in and looking it up and so on. Some people can't fill it in because they simply don't keep permanent records of what they owed several months ago. There's no real need to do that. So if you don't get letters coming back from your client's customers, you don't know whether it is because they agree or whether it is simply because they can't be bothered finding out why they agree, whether or not they agree. So negative circularizations are not really very good audit evidence. The circularization letter is written on client notepaper because there's a kind of confidentiality business relationship, if you like, between your client and their customer. And you can't just have auditors writing to people out of the blue saying, what did you owe this person at the end of the year? So the letter is written on client's notepaper. It's addressed to these various customers, asks them to confirm or otherwise the amount they owed at a particular date. And what is normal is to supply with it a stamped addressed envelope which sends a reply directly back to the auditor's office. Remember, when we were looking at the strength of evidence, we said auditor direct obtained is much better than via the client. If these letters came into the client could look at them and say, well, that one agrees, that's one for the auditor, this one doesn't agree, I'll just throw it away. So you want to hear the good news and the bad news directly from the client's customers, so replies go directly to the auditor's offices. As well as asking about the big debts, you should ask about slightly odd amounts. You should ask about very old debts to see if you get any sort of reply there. You should ask about credit balances because by and large you don't really expect credit balances on a receivables ledger. It implies something something slightly odd has gone on in the past. Not necessarily fraud, not necessarily wrong, but it's quite nice to know how it's come about. Circularizations need to be set up quite early after year end, if you're doing one at year end, so you can actually verify the year end balance, certain aspects of the year end balance. You want to get your letters out pretty quickly. You want to get them out maybe within a week, because it'll take a while for them to get to the client's customers, to get the right people in the client's customers accounting department, to get them to deal with it, for them to send it back. And you also want time to follow up. You want to follow up either non-replies. If it's a very big balance and this person hasn't replied to you, again, it might be because they can't be bothered, but you want maybe to be able to send them a second letter to encourage them, to remind them. And you also want to leave time to follow up any discrepancies which there are and which need to be explained. So receivable circularization, as I say, universal, fantastically important, gives very, very good evidence. It's third-party evidence. It's coming from the client's customers. It is written evidence. It is directly received by the auditor. It's got a lot of good stuff going for it. What else do we do to verify our receivables? And this is really a list of pretty much what you do. First of all, you must reconcile, and really before you do the circularization, you reconcile the receivables control account to the sum of the individual balances. And why would you do that? And it's the auditor who has to do this kind of reconciliation. Why do we do this rather boring business of just adding up maybe 1,000 receivables accounts and making sure they agree to the control account? Well, really the reason is that the receivables balance that appears in the current assets doesn't actually exist. The receivables balance is actually all the little individual balances. The total doesn't exist as a single entity or asset. It's only there because of these little individual balances. So we have to make sure that the total that's appearing in the current assets is actually made up, is constructed properly of these little individual balances, the separate balances on each customer's account. Another reason you have to think about it, let's say there were 1,000 customers and the client hands you this great big computer printout, 1,000 pages in it, one for each customer, and a total at the end, which is the receivables balance is going to be in the financial statements. Let's say the total of the receivables balance comes to 1 million. And within this 1,000 customers, one of them owes 200,000. But the client knows that this 200,000, there's a risk it won't be paid. It's going to be a bad debt, and obviously writing down receivables of 1 million down to receivables of 800,000 is going to be an extra expense of 200,000, and maybe the client doesn't want that. So what the client does in these 1,000 pages is you tear out the one that is the 200,000 from this client who's in some difficulty, and gives you 999 balances to audit, which you think adds up to the million. And it doesn't matter, you could circularize all of these people and you would never ever circularize the missing one. This missing one has got no chance of being selected in any sort of stratification or random selection. So you need to make sure that what you're working with to verify this 1 million, this total balance, is actually something which is going to reconcile to that 1 million. So you have to add it up. Aged listings, invoices 30 days old, 60 days old, 90 days old, and so on. Terribly important in the valuation of the receivables. By and large, you probably put in at 100% all receivables up to 60 or even maybe 90 days. After receivables gone on 90 days, you begin to worry more and more and more about it. Am I ever going to receive it? Once it's over 60, 90, 120 days, you may be giving up all hope. And quite often people arrange their general allowance for bad debts as certain percentages. So 4% of all debts up to 60 days old, then maybe 5% of debts between 60 and 90 days old, maybe 10% of debts over the 90 days. And we can't just take the client's word that the aged listing, the aged analysis has been done properly. They could be subtly moving things, to be a bit closer, so it looks as though the debts haven't been outstanding as long and look a bit healthier than they really are. You look at correspondence with customers. If a customer is not paying, we'll write to them. First of all, we telephone them, but eventually we'll write to them. And they might say, well, we're not paying because the goods you supplied were of inferior quality and we want an allowance. And there's going to be a bit of really argument about whether or not there is going to be an allowance for the inferior goods. So they might say, we never got the goods, we're not going to pay the invoice. And if people are complaining about goods or denying that they ever received the goods, presumably there's going to be a chance that at some point you may write down the receivable. You might write it off and say, well, maybe, they got lost in transit, or maybe the goods were really of inferior quality. So correspondence with your customers can give some insights into how happy and how those customers are and how likely it is that the debt will be paid. Board minutes, important to scrutinise those, because any large debt that the board is worried about should be discussed. The board should be discussing all large material transactions, and a major customer on the verge of liquidation you'd expect to see talked about at the board. Collection period, work out the collection period, the days of receivables. You do that by taking the receivables balance and dividing by the sales per day. So if one year it is 40 days, the next year it is 90 days, you usually get worried. Why are they not collecting these debts? Are they sending out incorrect invoices? Has their credit control department fallen to bits? Is it that the economic recession is so bad that all of these customers of our clients are in trouble and maybe the debts will never be repaid? Receipts after year end is a fantastic test if you can wait. So if there's 20,000 outstanding at year end from a customer that you're worried about, and then on the 20th of January that customer pays you 20,000, well, you know it was right to value it at 20,000 at year end. It's a debt that is proven to be a good debt. It's not going to be written down. Obviously some people might take a while, but sometimes people delay signing the audit report. They're waiting on a really major customer paying. They wait to the end of January, wait to the end of February, trying to drag their heels really to see if they get some more evidence that the debt is actually going to be honoured. And finally, scrutinise credit notes issued just after year end. What we're worried about here, what you can be worried about here, look at a company that wants to boost its sales. So what it does in 20th of December, it debits 100,000 to receivables, credits 100,000 to sales, never actually sends the invoice out to anybody. It might even be a false customer who's been set up. And then just after year end, what you do is you issue a credit note to that customer again, debiting sales and basically reversing out the debt from the customer's account. And if there are major credit notes issued really within about the first month, you want to make sure that these are not being issued to cover up false invoices that were issued just before year end. Now this list might look fairly comprehensive, but in fact the number of substantive tests that can be done is almost endless. And certainly other ones that will be done here is what I will, for the sake of argument to start with, to put something down on the list here, I will call tracing. Now, what do I mean by tracing? Because it means nothing on its own. You have to explain. You would have to explain exactly what the test was. And what it's really saying is, when you come across a receivable at year end that's made up of invoices which have been, we hope, legitimately issued because of orders. So going through the old sales process, an order would have been received from the customer. The dispatch would have been made to the customer. You would raise an invoice, post that to the customer, and you would debit the customer's account. That's how that little part of the receivable was created. So what you're able to do with a balance outstanding at year end, so for several of your customers, is to find out what invoices make up those balances, and then to trace those back, probably on a test basis, on a sample basis, test those back to the underlying causes of the transaction. So if somebody owed you 5,000 and that was made up of two invoices, 3,000 and 2,000, well, go and get the invoices, see that they were legitimate invoices, because that's why there's a legitimate receivable. For those two invoices, you would trace that back. Can I see the dispatch notes? Here they are. And then can I see the orders which caused those dispatch notes, which caused the orders which caused the receivable. We should also be able to trace the receipt of amounts just before year end, because if a receivable, it doesn't appear, if you like, at year end, an invoice has been sent out to the customer and has been paid by the customer. So we would also look at some of the credit entries in customers' accounts, cash coming in, and tracing that to the cash book. Yes, this is cash which has actually come in, and we can see maybe remittance advices, correspondence from the customer saying these are the invoices we are paying. So this tracing of detail really is very important. We can do this in nearly all of the balances which we have. Detailed examination of what makes up the year-end balance, what transactions were probably underlying that. Don't just use the word tracing in an exam. Say exactly what you're tracing and why you're tracing it. So tracing back to the invoices, back to the dispatch notes, back to the purchase orders, is telling you something. Yes, the amount exists. It is ours. It is been cut off properly. In other words, it belongs to a particular year which we have. And you could trace the other way. You could trace from a great big book of invoices and make sure these invoices are going to the debits of the customers' accounts. And that would help you with completeness. There's no point in having an invoice in the file which has never got on to the receivables ledger, because then you would be understating the assertion of completeness. Now, this means that substantive tests are divided into two sorts. You'll come across these terms. First of all, there is analytical review, and we had analytical review here. Basically, that was looking at the collection period. We did a ratio there. We could also do analytical reviews, maybe on discounts that were given to customers and so on. They would be kind of related to receivables. And then we have tests of detail. Tests of detail is getting down to very detailed, almost single transactions, single entries in the ledger, making sure that there's if you like, a complete chain which is supporting these entries in the ledger. And a lot of the rest of what we're looking at here is a test of detail. An age listing is a test of detail because you're getting down to very detailed figures and so on. Receipts after year end is essentially a test of detail because it's telling us which of these debts outstanding at year end is going to be is a good debt, is eventually paid. So remember, analytical review and tests of detail, the two types of substantive test.